everybody, welcome to my talk today, Specialist Nurse or Advanced Nurse Practitioner Interview and Questions. So if you're watching this, you are probably planning an interview for one of these roles. I really hope it helps you with your preparation. I also have a book, How to Prepare for Interviews and Develop Your Career as a Nurse or Midwife, with example personal statements and a lot more detail, but hopefully this session will give you a good overview to help your preparation. And good luck at interview, I should say as well. Okay, so I'm going to look at systematically focusing your background research before your interview. Talk about what to expect during your interview and planning for interview questions with some example questions, how to deal with nerves and learn from interview feedback. So the first thing to establish is the type of interview and the format of interview that you've been invited to. So check on your invite letter. If you're not quite sure, ask your human resources lead. For example, you might need to prepare for a two-part interview where you have a value-based interview followed by a short presentation. You may have a straightforward panel-based interview where you've got 2 or 3 interviewers asking you a series of different questions. And I'll talk through what a value-based interview is a bit later. Spend as much time as possible on preparing for your interview, as they'll be competitive within the remits and constraints of life. I know how busy it is for everybody out there. But some specialist nurse or advanced nurse practitioner interviews will require a presentation, and if you have not done an education course or have never presented in an interview before, that can be quite daunting. So on my YouTube channel, Support and Career Development for Nurses, I have a short, simple presentation to help you prepare a presentation for a nursing interview. So do check that out because it should help you. So when we're looking at structuring the background research, you're starting with gaining insight into exactly what the role entails. And the best way to do that is to book an informal visit with people that are already in the role or the lead recruiter. Even if you work in that area, so you might work on a neuroscience ward, but you've applied for a multiple sclerosis specialist nurse role and think you know everything to do about the role, you've looked at the job description, I would still book an informal visit with the specialist nurse, because what your perception may be different to the reality of the day-to-day workings and what that specialist nurse actually does. Review the job description and personal specification, and you'll see key headings and certain words that might be used, such as autonomous practitioner, and this will help you when you're preparing for potential questions that the interviewer may ask. Look at the employer intranet and the employer and NHS values, and you can reflect on the key targets, mission statement, what are the outcomes or targets within that service. And again, you can gain insight by talking to people that work already and the team that you'll be working with potentially. And then it's looking at scoping some papers and reviewing what's going on in this specialist field. And so it's helpful to talk to leads, but also to look at some literature. Now, some specialist nurse roles are very specific. So it might be a Macmillan nurse looking at quality of life and supporting patients in the community. So you can start looking at papers to do with quality of life and cancer care, for example. But others, an advanced nurse practitioner, may be generic and looking at assessment skills, or more generic, looking at the 4 pillars of advanced practice, which I'll talk about. So it's dependent on the role. Book meetings as soon as possible with key people in the team. And as I said, you may gain new insights for your interviews, such as asking them about the local service priorities, what are the current facilitators and barriers to their role currently. Review key local and national standards and policies to do with the role. So some specialist nurse roles have standard proficiencies, whereas other specialist nurse roles are less defined. So the NMC has standards of proficiency, for example, for specialist community public health nurses, and the NMC has some recordable areas of practice and qualifications for certain specialist roles. So these are ever evolving and changing, and in the future may change. So some key websites to look at will be the NHS websites, and the 4 nations have different websites, NHS websites. So for NHS England, for example, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and then the NMC website and the Royal College of Nursing. So for example, where I work in England, Health Education England has established the Centre for Advancing Practice. So if you're applying for an advanced nurse practitioner role, I would be looking in England, I would be looking on that website. So remember to review key websites for future updates, and those websites are your NHS websites, Nursing and Midwifery Council, our professional regulatory body, and the Royal College of Nursing. So I'm doing this talk in June 2022, but nursing's always evolving and changing. For example, at the moment, we've got Health Education England has established the Centre for Advancing Practice. The Royal College of Nursing 2018 has Royal College of Nursing Standards for Advanced Level Nursing Practice and a Royal College of Nursing Clinical Professional Resource. Now these will be continually being updated, but the principle is the same. Review those websites and establish what the up-to-date standards and resources are at the time of you applying for your role. There is ongoing professional debate regarding standardization and regulation of advanced nursing practice currently in the UK. This is 2022. So watch my YouTube video on my YouTube channel, How to Become a UK Specialist Nurse or Advanced Nurse Practitioner, where I explain some of that discussion. And the Nursing and Midwifery Council in the UK is aiming for potential approval of new standards for advanced practice by 2025. So if you're applying for an advanced nurse practitioner role, the 4 pillars for an advanced practice consultant role are very helpful to prepare for interview. And when you're looking at advanced nursing practice as a level of practice, it reflects the 4 pillars of advanced practice, which is clinical practice, leadership and management, education and research. So many master's level programs, advanced nurse practitioner or autonomous healthcare practitioner programs or e-portfolios will reflect these 4 pillars, and the questioning of interviews and demonstrating transferable skills would align to these 4 pillars of advanced practice. And these pillars originally came from Manley in 1997, who presented a preliminary conceptual framework for advanced practice, and this was developed from a 3-year action research study which was carried out in a nursing development unit. When you're looking at preparing or thinking about some examples from your past experiences and current experiences aligned to the 4 pillars of advanced practice, it's helpful to have some prepared and to think about this before your interview. So for example, most of you will act as educators or practice supervisors to students or to newly registered nurses, sharing ideas or resources or experiences with others. Do you support orientations or induct new starters or students or nursing associates, for example? So teaching others, developing resource packs or acting as a link nurse in an area. Thinking about leadership, management, work projects. Have you collaborated or led any research projects or published any work, contributed to policy development, joined specialist, local, national charity forums, attended conferences that have aligned to the role of the specialist area, where you shared the work and brought back work after the conference, and supported line managers or the local leadership team with a collaborative project, led quality improvement or service improvement projects, patient education, health education or promotion, and clinical academic work and courses. I have a video, 5 ways to influence nursing practice, that gives you some more specific examples that might also help. Local and national systems and standards of care, have a think about, that link to the specialist area. Are there key performance indicators nationally for the service area for this role? Any evaluations or audits or recently published CQC reports, national risk assessments, incident reporting, escalation standards and guidelines, and they're helpful to look at for scenario-based questions, because you might be asked a question, what would you do if a patient deteriorated that you were advising or supporting? The Mental Capacity Act and deprivation of liberty safeguards, and there may be changes to liberty protection safeguards in the future, so always check up-to-date practice online on the NHS websites, on your local and national websites. Reflect on your key transferable skills, the differences and similarities between your current role and this new role that you've applied for. Your managerial, leadership, organisational responsibilities as a specialist nurse or advanced nurse practitioner. Sometimes you're working autonomously, you're organising your workload, you're having to balance your work. You're still working within a service and a team, but it's more autonomous potentially. What are you expected to deliver in this new role or as part of a service or team? And what transferable skills do you currently possess that you can use in this new role? And that's why it's helpful to do some of the looking at the advanced practice pillars, for example, the 4 pillars before interview, and to start looking at what current skills you have and aligning them to the advanced practitioner role. Other topics: understanding the roles and responsibilities of the team within the service that you'll be working. And if you're not quite sure, you can email people for clarification before the interview. And reviewing hot topics, current topics within the specialist area, field or profession across professional journals, because you might be asked to discuss a contemporary related topic that links to that role. Preparing for interviews. So as I mentioned earlier, there's different types of interviews. Is it a face-to-face or an online interview? How long is it? So you really prepared for the interview. And as I mentioned earlier, is it value-based? Has it got some scenario-based exercises or a presentation, or a straightforward panel-based interview? Be punctual. Always check the location or travel links, and more frequently nowadays you're going to be doing virtual online interviews, so ensure that your internet connections work and that you don't do your interview by holding your mobile phone throughout the whole interview. You need to have a stand for your mobile if you're going to use a mobile, and make sure that you can see your face as well. If your internet connection is poor at home, then book a library room, or many institutions will allow you to book rooms for free nowadays as well. With value-based interviews aim to select individuals who align closely to the values of the organisation that you're applying for, or the NHS, hence me asking you to do that bit of preparation earlier, to look at the values of the NHS or the organisation that you're applying for. And you usually get a generic question to start, such as, give me an example where you've promoted quality care in practice. And then once you've given an example, this will be followed by further probing and drilling down questions according to your responses interview. So They may say, you mentioned that this had an impact on patient care. How do you know it had an impact? Or how did you evaluate the quality of your care? Value-based interviewers expect a relevant example that demonstrates your understanding and practical application. So they expect you to bring an example of something not that you've just observed with other people, but that actually demonstrates your skills. So it's your example that you were involved with. So spend time choosing and reflecting on your best practical example before the interview. What to expect during your interview. So one lead interviewer should chair and manage the time throughout the interview, and there should always be more than one interviewer to prevent bias. And interviewers will make notes when you answer questions or deliver a presentation. And some interviewers will mark presentations using a very specific scoring tool or assessment scale. What the interviewers are looking for and what they want to know is firstly that you understand what you've applied for. What do you know about the specialist field, the area, the role or the service, depending on the role? How is the role different to your current role? Will you be able to manage the additional responsibility and achieve a healthy work-life balance? They want to know that you've got the knowledge and skills to undertake that role. Do you hold the right values? Do you have the potential and willingness to develop key skills in the future if needed? Do you communicate and collaborate positively with others in the team? Can you cope with future challenges? And they want to know that you're the best candidate for this role. And often these roles are competitive, so questions will be asked to differentiate between candidates that link to the job description and the key transferable skills. So a few example generic questions. Why have you applied for this specialist nurse or advanced nurse practitioner role? What led you to apply for a role in this particular specialist area or field? Tell me what you know about this ward or community setting or service, specialist area, the patients you will be caring for, the team, the service you will be leading. What will you need the most support with if you're offered this role? Which of the 4 pillars of advanced practice is your weakest area? How do you plan to address gaps? What transferable skills do you hold that link to this role? Can you give me an example where you've led a team, you've influenced change, you've promoted quality standards, you've delivered a project? Could you give an example where you've solved a problem in your clinical role or dealt with a recent challenge or overcome a recent challenge at work? Explain the outcome, how this impacted on staff or patients or you, or how you evaluated the impact. How do you keep yourself up to date? How do you deliver evidence-based practice? You might be asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Or a scenario-based question, what would you do if this happened? And often the scenario-based questions, they may link to challenges in the role. So by doing your preparation, an informal visit or meeting to talk to people in the role about the challenges that they have in the role, really will help you inform your preparation for these scenario-based questions. Looking at the risk assessments, incident reporting and escalation policies. What would you do if a patient's mental health deteriorated that you were talking to in clinic? So these sort of questions often involve risk assessment, escalation and incident reporting. So helpful to do that preparation, as I mentioned earlier. So during your interview, dealing with nerves. So this is something that's to be expected. Interviewers expect it, and it's the same whatever level of nurse you are. If you're excessively nervous, let interviewers know so they can get you a drink of water and give you a few minutes to compose yourself. Remember, you've done really well securing an interview, because shortlisting and going through personal statements, sometimes not everybody is shortlisted, and these posts are often competitive. And interviewers are human and they want you to do well. So just ask for more time. If you're not quite sure, you've got confused with the question, then throw it back to the interviewers and ask them to explain it. You're not quite sure what they mean. That's absolutely fine. The more you prepare, the more confident you'll feel. You may want to use mnemonics or memory aids in case you go blank, but just do your best and put your interview in context. You can apply again later or go for another role elsewhere and learn from your interview. If you're not offered the role, make sure that you request verbal feedback from an interviewer. Employers are not necessarily obliged to offer written feedback. Ask the interviewer for some specific feedback. How could I have improved my answers? Or what was my strongest or weakest answer? Don't spend time dwelling and energy dwelling on what ifs. Reflect on your interview feedback to inform your future preparation. You might want to write down the interview questions and feedback so that it'll help you with your future preparation, because you'll probably forget if you don't go for another interview for a few months or year. And it's helpful to book a mock interview prior to your next interview if you can find an appropriate person to interview you. And mock interviewers cannot be on your interview panel. So it's perfectly ethical to book a mock interview, but the person cannot be on the actual interview panel. That's the only thing to think about. And the key to tips to success are to align your past and current experiences to the role you're applying for. Allow time to prepare for your interview. Never presume the job is yours. Ask for interview feedback if you're not offered the role, and just prepare as much as possible. So I wish you every success. Good luck if you've got an interview coming up. And if you've got any questions, put them in the YouTube questions, or you can contact me on my website or DM me on Twitter or Instagram. And take care. Good luck in your future career.